They told her she should be thankful, grateful just to exist on the sidelines of her own life. But when her son called her a burden and her husband dismissed her worth, she didn't beg. She vanished. And with one signature, she took everything they thought they'd inherited. Now she's rebuilding her world 20 floors above the life they tried to control. But what happens when the past refuses to stay in the past and secrets built on betrayal come crashing through the glass? The morning light in the Whitmore estate didn't pour. It hovered, like it was reluctant to settle. Everything about the house had that same tired elegance, a grace that had long since soured into silence. Tall ceilings, arched doorways, ornate furniture that no longer reflected any warmth. The wallpaper in the front parlor had started to peel, delicate blue florals curling inward like dried petals. It was still beautiful, in that way ghosts are beautiful, but it wasn't home, not really. This estate had been in Peter's family for generations. Whitmore men had walked these halls, posed in the oil portraits lining the dining room wall, their stern faces watching every move I made. When Peter and I married, he said the house would be ours. But it never was. I was just the woman who dusted around the edges, who learned where not to speak, how to host without taking up space. Everything here belonged to someone else. Most of all, me. I padded down the hallway in slippers, the sound swallowed by thick Persian rugs. My fingers brushed the banister as I passed the staircase, polished so often I could see the distorted shape of my face in it. It didn't look like me. In the kitchen, Jordan sat at the island counter, tall and slouched in a way only 19-year-olds could master. He didn't acknowledge me as I entered, too focused on his phone. Same hoodie he wore yesterday. His hair needed a trim. I poured coffee, pretending I didn't feel the temperature drop when he was around. "You should be grateful, Mom," he said, eyes still on the screen. "Most people wouldn't let their kids stay in the guest house rent-free." I didn't answer right away. The sugar spoon rattled against the side of my mug. I stirred too long until the coffee was lukewarm and my face was composed. "You're right," I said finally without looking at him. "I am grateful." He gave a little nod like he was the one offering charity. Then he slid off the stool and left without another word. I watched the door swing shut behind him. The silence that followed didn't feel like peace. It felt like aftermath. That was the thing about Jordan. He didn't scream, didn't slam doors. His words did the slamming. I carried my mug into the front room, letting my eyes scan the familiar chaos of elegance. Crystal vases holding dead arrangements, gold-framed photos from a decade ago. I looked thinner in all of them, more certain somehow. That version of me smiled with teeth. Peter's study door was open. I hovered in the doorway. He sat behind his grandfather's desk, typing away on a silver laptop. The wood beneath his elbows was darker from years of use, his father's, then his, and probably, eventually, Jordan's. He looked up when he noticed me. That same smile, soft, polished, almost tender. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep." He nodded. "Try that meditation app I showed you?" I shook my head. Didn't help. He stood, smoothing the sleeves of his blazer, always dressed, even at home, always prepared to be seen. Peter was a master of civility. He never raised his voice, never touched in anger, but his control was in the omissions, in what he didn't say, the doors he never opened, the way he managed to take up all the oxygen in a room while insisting I relax and breathe. "Don't forget we have dinner with the Langfords tonight," he said, brushing past me. I remember. "Wear that navy dress," he added. "You look polished in it." "Of course," I said. My voice came out level, practiced. It was easier that way, easier to let him script the scene. I walked down the back corridor once he was gone, past the collection of dusty encyclopedias and bronze candle sconces. The walls here were closer together, the light dimmer. I stopped at the last portrait, Peter's grandfather, Everett Whitmore, his expression stern, eyes narrowed as though already judging me. I stood there for a long time, coffee cold in my hands, wondering what my life might look like if no one was watching. The truth was, I didn't want the estate. I didn't want the guest house or the Langford's approval or even Peter's curated affection. I wanted space, voice, a room that didn't echo someone else's expectations back at me. But in this family, desire was a dangerous thing. It made you look ungrateful, and worse,
It made you inconvenient. So I stayed quiet. I walked the halls, and I told myself I was lucky.
The roast was dry. I hadn't meant it to be. It sat too long while I tried to find the good china. Peter liked things done properly. Even now, even in silence. We sat at the long dining table, the chandelier humming softly above us. Crystal glasses. White linens. Everything polished and gleaming. But the tension was sour and thick, like something curdled just under the surface. Jordan pushed his peas around his plate, fork tapping ceramic with a rhythm that got under my skin. Peter sipped wine and scrolled through his phone, pretending not to notice the gaping quiet between us. I took a breath. "How's the project going, Jordan?" He didn't look up. "Fine." Peter didn't even glance up from his screen. "You should show your mother sometime. She might have notes." That made Jordan smirk. "No offense, but Mom's a little out of touch with what matters these days." I set my fork down slowly. I was just trying to ask. He finally looked up then. Sharp eyes, tired from screens, but alert enough to aim. "You always try. That's the thing. Try to make it look like everything's okay. Like you're some matriarch holding us all together. But really, you're just taking up space. You don't work. You don't contribute. And still, you act like you own this place." My heart stopped, just for a second. The air caught in my lungs. Peter looked up then, barely. "Jordan, no, let's be real for once," Jordan went on. "You live in that house like it's still the 1950s. Dad does everything. You act like letting me stay in the guest house is some huge favor, but you don't even pay for the groceries." Silence, deep and immediate. The room shrunk. My throat burned, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. Not now. My hand reached for my glass, fingers trembling slightly. The crystal chimed against the table as I lifted it. I kept my face steady, controlled, a good hostess to the end. Inside, something split. I'd been called passive, grateful, fragile, now obsolete. Jordan speared a piece of meat, oblivious. Peter offered a weak shrug, as though this was simply family tension, nothing worth disrupting the evening over. "I don't think I've overstayed," I said, my voice so calm it scared me. Jordan didn't answer. Peter said, "Let's just finish dinner." I smiled, nodded, passed the rolls as if nothing had happened. I made it through dessert, the kitchen cleanup, and even the sound of Peter's footsteps retreating into his study afterward. And then, when the house went quiet, I went to the butler's office. The keys were still in the drawer. I opened the old laptop, dusty but functional, and pulled up the listing service. I still had the property documents. My name was still on the deed. They'd forgotten that. They always did. The photos on the listing were out of date, but the house would sell anyway. It had pedigree, land, legacy. All the things Jordan and Peter loved more than me. I filled in the fields one by one, square footage, number of rooms, lot size. I described the gardens, the third-floor library, the ballroom we never used. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. When I got to the contact owner section, I used my personal email, the one they didn't know about. I clicked submit and sat back. The screen blinked, listing posted. The house wasn't theirs anymore. They just didn't know it yet. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in the dark, watching the ceiling fade from black to blue as dawn approached. My heartbeat didn't slow. Not even after the listing went live. Maybe especially not after. 1,000 what-ifs spun in my head like ribbons unraveling. What if no one bought it? What if they found out too soon? What if Jordan retaliated? What if Peter used his charm to spin the narrative before I had a chance to defend myself? But for every fear, there was something else. What if I left? Just walked away from all of it? What if I had a home with no echoes of other people's control? A space where no one asked me to smile more or thank them for breathing? I imagined waking up in a room with wide windows and quiet air. No Peter, no Jordan, no history pressing its thumb into my back every time I exhaled. I imagined my own kitchen, not marble countertops and wine fridges, but something warm, simple. I imagined waking up alone and not feeling lonely. The image was so sweet I almost cried. Then the sun came up. Peter found the listing 3 days later. He burst into the conservatory while I was pruning the orchids, the tablet in his hand trembling more than the leaves in my grip. "You listed the house?" he asked, voice rising but not loud yet. He never yelled unless the doors were closed. "Without telling me." I set the shears down. My fingers were coated in dirt. I didn't stand. I didn't realize I needed your permission. It's our home, Madison. No, I said, it's your inheritance. Your family's name on every piece of silver. But legally, half of it's mine. He looked at me like he was seeing someone else, like I'd slipped out of character. This is a phase. You're angry about dinner. Jordan crossed a line. I get it. But let's not make impulsive decisions just to prove something. I stood slowly, wiping my hands on the cloth at my waist. This isn't impulsive. It's overdue. You've always needed stability, security. I provide that. No, I said, letting the words ring between us. You provide control. I provide silence. His expression hardened. Don't do this. I already did. He paced then, trying to recalibrate. People will talk. What does that accomplish? Freedom, I said. Finally. He stared at me for a long time. I half expected him to laugh, to shake his head and tell me I was being dramatic. But he didn't. He walked out instead. No grand scene, just retreat. It was worse than yelling. Later that week, I went for a walk to clear my head and ended up at Claire's gate. She lived 2 lots over in a modern cottage that always smelled like lavender and wood polish. She answered the door in a loose sweater and bare feet, eyes curious, open. I told her everything. She didn't flinch. You actually listed it? She said, pouring us both tea. I clicked the button. Claire grinned. Hell yes. She was everything I hadn't allowed myself to be, funny, direct, untethered. Divorced twice, child-free by choice, a painter who sold just enough work to cover her needs and fill the rest with peace. Her kitchen was the opposite of mine, cramped, a little chaotic, but alive. There was a crooked magnet that read, "Make your exit loud." I don't know what happens next, I admitted. Who cares? She said. You took the first swing. That's more than most women do. I sat at her counter while she showed me listings for downtown apartments and city penthouses, the ones with clean white walls and morning light that felt honest. We laughed over one brochure in particular. The photo of the guest suite was barely a closet. Still, Claire said, pointing at the screen, even that would be yours. You could paint the walls hot pink if you wanted. I looked at the brochure, then thought about my estate, 47 rooms, and not a single one where I could scream without being heard. Or judged. Claire tapped her screen. So, ready to trade grandeur for peace? I thought of Jordan's words. Peter's smile. The years I'd spent nodding at dinner tables, hosting parties with my name never on the invitation. Yes, I said. I think I am. I meant it, even if it terrified me. The envelope was heavier than it looked. I held it in both hands like it might burn through me if I wasn't careful. Inside was the check. The estate, every inch of grandeur, dust, and buried resentment, was gone. Sold. Final. I sat alone at the breakfast table, the one no one ever actually used, staring at my name in crisp, inky letters, beside a figure that should have felt like freedom, but instead felt like the closing of a door that had stood open too long. Outside, rain lashed against the tall windows. The sky was the same bruised gray that used to make me feel trapped. But not today. Today it mirrored how I felt, raw, dark, and resolute. I heard Peter's footsteps before I saw him. The envelope was still open on the table. He paused in the doorway, eyes catching the edge of the paper, and I didn't flinch. I didn't try to hide it. There was no pretending left. What is that? He asked, voice tight. I looked up, steady. Proceeds from the sale. He blinked once, then again, slower. You finalized it? I signed last night. He walked into the room like a man moving toward something dangerous. He didn't sit. Just stood across from me, jaw tight. You didn't even tell me it went through. I didn't think you'd need notice to say goodbye to something you never let me own. His laugh was hollow, sharp. You think this is yours to destroy? I stood then too. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking at my sides. I didn't destroy anything. I made a decision, for once. Peter's fingers curled against the back of a chair. You have no idea what you've done. This house, it was supposed to be for Jordan, his future. He doesn't want it. He wants to use it to measure my worth. He leaned in. You're being reckless, emotional. You've made a mess you can't clean up. I stepped around the table, every step pulling tighter against the tension in my chest. Then let it be a mess. At least it's mine. Lightning lit the room for a split second. enough to cast harsh shadows against the walls we'd once painted together. The thunder that followed cracked open whatever silence remained between us. Jordan walked in just as the storm outside reached its peak. His hair was damp. He looked between us, at the open envelope on the table. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone already defensive. Peter turned to him, motioning toward the check. "Your mother sold the house, behind our backs." Jordan's mouth opened and closed. Wait, what?" I met his eyes. "Yes, it's done." "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, stepping back like I'd struck him. "You just gave it away?" "No," I said, voice still firm. "I took it back." "This is insane," Jordan snapped. "You don't even know how to be on your own. You're not built for it." I crossed my arms, not to shield myself, but to hold myself together. "Maybe I'm not, but I'll learn. That's more than I can say for either of you." Peter's voice dropped to a low, controlled growl. "You think money makes you free?" "No," I said, "but being owned certainly doesn't." I picked up the check, folded it carefully, and slipped it into my coat pocket. Their faces blurred behind my resolve as I moved past them toward the front door. Peter didn't follow. Jordan didn't speak. The rain met me on the porch, cold and insistent, soaking through the thin fabric of my sleeves. I didn't care. I let it wash over me like absolution. I stood there, the weight of everything behind me pressing against the wind. But I didn't turn back. Not once. The elevator doors opened with a quiet glide, and I stepped into the stillness of my new life. The penthouse smelled like fresh paint and lemon-scented polish, clean, bright, untouched. The wide expanse of glass let in the afternoon sun, and for a moment I just stood there, blinking in the light. My first thought, there was nothing to hide behind. The space was minimalist, white walls, matte oak floors, and windows stretching from one end of the room to the other. No heavy drapes, no oil portraits watching, no grand staircase that echoed every argument. Just light. Endless open light. The city buzzed 20 stories below me, but up here it felt quiet. Still. Mine. Claire arrived 20 minutes later with iced coffee, sunglasses perched in her hair, and a massive catalog rolled under one arm. "Look at you," she said, stepping in and turning slowly in place. "God, Madison, this is stunning." "I keep waiting for someone to tell me I don't belong here." She handed me the coffee. "Then let me be the first to tell you, you absolutely do." We spent the rest of the day curled over catalogs and Pinterest boards, marking things with sticky tabs. I wasn't used to choosing furniture just for myself. The last time I picked a couch, Peter vetoed it in 5 seconds. This time, Claire talked me into color. Muted sage, soft blue, warm rust. I chose a velvet reading chair. I picked out a glass dining table, even though I wasn't sure I'd host anyone. By late afternoon, we were sprawled on the floor of the living room, laughing over the number of rugs we'd circled in one magazine. "What if I get this wrong?" I asked. "What if none of this fits?" Claire sipped her drink. "Then we try again. That's the point. You get to make mistakes now, and fix them, on your own terms." I looked out at the skyline, glass towers, sun catching on distant cranes. It was the first time in months I didn't feel heavy. The next morning, I met Marcus. I was waiting for the delivery truck when I saw him. Tall, dark jeans, vintage band tee, a little older than me, but in that self-contained way that suggested he knew who he was. He had a grocery bag in one arm and a leash in the other, his golden retriever nosing curiously at my ankles. "Sorry," he said, tugging the leash gently. "She's nosy." I smiled. "I don't mind." He looked up then, taking in my expression like he was reading the mood as much as the words. "You just move in?" "Yesterday." "Welcome. I'm Marcus, Unit 21B, and this is Scout." The dog licked my hand. I reached down to pet her without thinking. "Madison," I said. "Penthouse." Marcus nodded. "You need anything, let me know. It's a good building, quiet. People keep to themselves, but they're decent." We talked for a minute. He told me where the best cafe was, warned me about a tricky elevator that sometimes stalled if you pressed too many buttons. His voice was calm, a little dry, easy to listen to. When the delivery guys finally showed, he offered to help carry the boxes. I said yes. That evening, I watched the city lights flicker on from the balcony, I hadn't realized how used to the dark I'd become until I saw this much brightness. I thought about the first night Peter brought me to the estate, how impressed I'd been. It wasn't the same kind of awe, but this was cleaner, lighter, a beginning, not a trap dressed up as privilege. Claire called to check in, already halfway through planning my freedom dinner. Marcus texted, "If you need someone to hang curtains, I'm surprisingly competent." I smiled. I hadn't smiled like that in weeks. The space still echoed. No rugs yet, no art on the walls. But there was a plant in the corner, a record player humming low in the background, and a stack of books I'd bought with no one's opinion but my own. For the first time in years, I felt it. Something warm flickering inside me. Not joy, not yet, but hope. A pilot light reigniting. The wine glasses sparkled beneath the pendant lights, perfectly aligned on the marble island. Claire had helped me arrange the hors d'oeuvres, tiny crostini with goat cheese and fig, shrimp cocktail in glass cups, cut vegetables in polished ceramic bowls. There were scented candles burning near the balcony doors, and a low jazz playlist hummed from the speaker in the corner. I kept adjusting things, fussing with napkins and drink placement. This was my first real gathering in the penthouse. My housewarming, my beginning. People from the building trickled in, warm smiles and bottle bags in hand, all curious and kind. I smiled back, made introductions, floated between groups like I was back on autopilot. Only now, I wasn't playing hostess for someone else's reputation. The glass walls shimmered with the reflection of laughter and city lights. Claire toasted me just before sunset, raising her glass with that unflinching grin of hers. "To Madison," she said, "for finding the courage to start over. May this space only ever be yours." There were cheers, clinks. My cheeks flushed. I raised my glass with the others, murmured my thanks, and tried to believe every word of it. But then the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Peter was standing there in a navy coat, one hand tucked in the pocket, the other resting on Jordan's shoulder. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Celebrating," Peter said. "It's your housewarming, isn't it?" Jordan didn't meet my eyes. His jaw was locked, gaze flicking past me into the space. I stepped back instinctively, and they entered as if I'd invited them. Conversation quieted. I felt the room tilt, like the floor had dropped 2 degrees. Claire caught my eye across the island, brows lifting slightly in question. I shook my head once. Peter moved through the crowd like he owned it, like this glass-walled world was his too. He picked up a drink, smiled politely at my neighbors, thanked a man named Eugene for the wine recommendation. "You're doing well for yourself," Peter said as he circled back toward me. "Impressive view?" I didn't answer. He lowered his voice. "But it's not real, is it?" I blinked. "What are you talking about?" "This," he said, motioning around. "This fantasy. You can't host a party and pretend it erases 30 years. You don't know how to be alone." "You're wrong," Jordan approached then, expression unreadable. "You're not answering our calls." "I don't owe you anything," I said. Peter set his glass down with a soft but final clink. "We need to talk, privately." "I'm not going back," I said, louder than I intended. The room hushed further. Conversation ceased. Peter's face darkened. "Madison, be reasonable." "No," I said. "I was reasonable for 27 years." He stepped forward, voice sharper now. "That house is sold. You'll regret this." The anger rushed through me like water bursting through a dam. "You came here to shame me in my own home, uninvited, and you think I'll just fold?" I saw the shift in him, the realization that I wasn't going to fall back into place. "Come home," he said, trying again, softer now, manipulative as ever. "This isn't you." I looked around, at the people who had shown up because they wanted to, at Claire, unmoving, supportive, at Marcus standing near the hallway, arms crossed, watching Peter with quiet wariness. "This is exactly who I am," I said. "Finally." Peter stared at me, and for once said nothing. Jordan looked as though he wanted to disappear. They left minutes later. No outburst, no slam door, just silence that weighed 1,000 pounds. The party resumed slowly, hesitantly. People offered me supportive smiles. Claire pressed a fresh drink into my hand. Marcus didn't say anything, but his presence nearby was grounding. I smiled and laughed and thanked people for coming, but the night no longer felt like a beginning. It felt like a stand, and I wasn't sure if I'd won or just survived. The messages started subtly. A single text from Peter at 1:13 a.m. "You've made your point. Come home." I didn't respond. The next night another. "We're worried about you. Jordan says you're not yourself." And then, "There are things you don't understand. Financially, this is a mistake." By the third message, I stopped opening them. But I couldn't bring myself to block him either. Not yet. Jordan's approach was different. Cold, calculated. He left a voicemail on my second day of silence. "You abandoned your family, Mom. You don't get to pretend that's noble." I listened to it twice, then deleted it. But his voice stuck in my ears like static I couldn't turn off. Every quiet moment in the penthouse echoed with the residue of his disapproval. At night, sleep became a visitor that never stayed. I wandered from window to window, bare feet on cool wood floors, watching the city below blur into soft neon tears. The penthouse was beautiful, but it amplified loneliness. Every glass wall reflected the isolation back at me. I'd sit at the dining table at 2 a.m., half-drunk tea forgotten beside a closed laptop, staring at the wall like it might offer answers. The silence grew claws. My mind filled in their voices when they weren't calling. "You're impulsive. You don't know how to manage on your own. You'll regret this." The next morning, Claire found me curled on the balcony chair, still in last night's clothes. She showed up with croissants and too much sunlight. "Have you slept?" I shook my head, staring out at the city. "They don't stop. They're not yelling, but it's worse. It's constant, undermining." Claire handed me a mug. "They're scared. Men like that don't react well when you take back your power." I wanted to believe her, but something in me cracked anyway. "They're wearing me down," I whispered. "I thought this would feel like freedom, but some nights it just feels like I'm floating." She didn't try to contradict me. She just sat beside me and held my hand. That afternoon, Marcus came by to check on the curtain rods. He didn't ask questions at first, just worked in silence, a quiet rhythm of drilling and fitting brackets into place. The dog, Scout, napped near the balcony, but he glanced over when I winced at another ping from my phone. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, then nodded, then shook my head. "I think they're trying to break me down piece by piece," I said. "Not all at once, just slow erosion. A word here, a guilt trip there. They want me to question if I've ruined my life." Marcus set the drill down. "And have you?" "No," I said too quickly, then softer. "Maybe. I don't know. Some days I feel strong. Others, I just feel alone, like a traitor." He stepped closer, calm and steady. "They want you to feel like a traitor because they only saw you as loyal to their version of you." The words landed with the kind of weight that sticks. "I never had anyone tell me that before," I said. He shrugged lightly. "Maybe they should have." We stood in silence. No need to fill the air with more than that. When he left, he said, "Call if it gets too loud, even when it's quiet." That night, the phone stayed face down, but I slept 4 hours. It was a start. It started with the lock. I heard it click open in the middle of a storm, the kind of storm that rattles the high windows of the penthouse and turns the skyline into a blur of wet, flickering light. I was barefoot, in sweatpants, halfway through a glass of wine I wasn't really tasting. The rain had been my company all night, until I heard the sound of the door latch sliding. At first I thought I'd imagined it. But when the door pushed open and Jordan stepped inside, soaked and fuming, I knew this wasn't a hallucination. "You gave me the code once," he said before I could speak. "Guess you forgot." I stared at him, hood up, sneakers dripping onto the hardwood. His eyes were wild, wet from rain or rage or both. My hand tightened around the stem of the wine glass. "Jordan," I said, my voice low and cracking, "you can't be here." He ignored that, shut the door behind him like he owned the space. "I had to see it for myself," he said. "This fantasy of yours." "It's not a fantasy," I replied, backing toward the kitchen island. "It's my life now." "You really think that?" His voice rose. "You think leaving your family and running off to play independent woman makes you some kind of hero?" I set the glass down. It wobbled. "I didn't leave you. I left the version of myself you all demanded I be. That version kept things together," he snapped. "That version raised me. Kept the house from falling apart while Dad worked. You just threw that away. For what? A skyline view?" Lightning cracked. The entire room lit up in a flash of white. I flinched. Jordan didn't. "You never saw us as enough," he went on, voice sharp. "That's the truth. You were always waiting to escape." My chest tightened. "Don't you dare." "It's true," he said. "You wanted a reset, to erase us. But you're not a victim, Mom. You're selfish." The words hit harder than I expected. Maybe because some small part of me feared he was right, that this was a mistake, that I'd built this new life on a foundation of grief and exhaustion, not strength. My knees buckled. I reached for the counter but missed. The stem of the wine glass snapped under my palm, the bowl hitting the floor and shattering. Red wine splashed across the white tile like blood. Thunder boomed. Jordan froze. I sank to the floor beside the shards, breath hitching, chest heaving. My body wouldn't obey. Tears blurred the lights outside, the penthouse spinning. My voice cracked open before I could catch it. "I gave everything to that house, to your father, to you." He said nothing. And when I asked for one thing, just one thing for myself, you both acted like I committed a crime. I wiped at my eyes, hands trembling. "You want to call me selfish? Fine. But at least I'm finally choosing me." He stared at me for a long moment, rain still streaming from his jacket. And then, without another word, he turned and left. The door slammed shut, rattling the walls. I sat there for what felt like hours, rain and silence. My reflection in the puddle of wine looked like someone else, someone broken. Later, I rose shakily and tried to clean up. I tossed the glass fragments into the bin, mopped the wine, but nothing could erase the sick weight in my stomach. I needed air. In the office nook, I reached for my laptop to check an email. My financial advisor had followed up on a previous transfer I didn't remember making. Curious, I clicked into my banking portal. That's when I saw it. 2 transfers, large ones, out of my personal account, marked under a Shell LLC I didn't recognize. I opened the trail and found more, steady siphons, each just small enough not to trigger alarms, spaced out over the last year. And the name on the secondary access? Jordan Whitmore. My breath stopped. A deeper audit of the accounts confirmed it. Peter had set up the linkage. My signature was nowhere. It had been quietly arranged between them while I was still in the estate, still trusting them with everything. The floor beneath me didn't feel real anymore. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. And it wasn't just about the money. It was the belief they held that I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't be capable, that I didn't deserve to protect what was mine. My tears dried in that moment, not from healing but from something colder, resolve. They didn't just underestimate me. They gambled everything on it. The next morning, I called my lawyer before the sun had even cleared the skyline. His voice was calm, clipped, professional. Someone who'd seen women like me walk through years of erosion and finally crack the surface. I told him everything, my voice flat, like I was reciting someone else's crisis. The hidden transfers, the unauthorized access, the betrayal. "Do you have documentation?" he asked. "I will." Claire arrived with her usual energy tamped down to a quiet, fierce focus. She didn't ask if I was okay. She knew the answer. Instead, she handed me a flash drive and a thermos of black coffee. "We're going to bury them in paper," she said. "The good kind, receipts." We sat cross-legged on my living room floor, surrounded by printouts, statements, account summaries, old tax documents I hadn't looked at in years. Highlighters in hand, we combed through it all. I found the patterns. Claire organized them. Line after line of evidence came into focus like bruises under fluorescent light. Peter's name, Jordan's alias, transfers masked as maintenance, investment holding, interfamily distributions, each one a scar. I scanned the files and forwarded them to my lawyer by noon. He called back that evening. "You have a case," he said. "A strong one. Unauthorized transfers, forged consents, misuse of marital assets. We can pursue civil action. Potential criminal liability if we push it." My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with clarity. "What do I need to do?" "Hold the line," he said. "Stay clean. Document everything. Don't confront them yet. We'll file first. Let the system hit them before your words do." After we hung up, I stood at the window, city glowing beneath me like circuitry. The rain had stopped, but the wind still pushed against the glass. I imagined Peter's face when he opened that envelope, Jordan's voice when the illusion shattered, The house they fought to protect wasn't theirs anymore, and neither was the version of me they depended on. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I felt awake. Later, Marcus knocked on the door, Scout wagging her tail beside him. "I heard yelling last night," he said gently. "You okay?" "No," I answered. "But I'm getting there." I told him everything. Not the sanitized version, not the polite summary, the raw truth. About the stolen funds, the fear, the moment on the floor when I thought I might never get back up. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer empty reassurances. Instead, he said, "You didn't break. You woke up." And then quieter. "You know, it's strange. Some people wait their whole lives to live on the top floor, above it all, but they're still trapped. But you broke out from the basement." I smiled, slow and real. "It doesn't feel like freedom yet." He looked at me carefully. "That's because it's still justice, but they're not the same thing." I stepped closer without realizing it, the space between us humming. Scout nosed between us, oblivious. We laughed, and for the first time in weeks, I believed the next chapter might not be written in anger, but in power, in presence, in a voice finally heard, and maybe, just maybe, in something softer waiting around the corner. The penthouse was silent when they arrived. My lawyer stood near the bar, calm and unreadable in his charcoal suit. Claire lingered by the hall entrance, not officially part of the meeting, but a necessary presence. Marcus wasn't there, though he'd offered. This part I needed to do alone. Peter walked in first, expression neutral but alert. Jordan followed a beat later, eyes sharp, already irritated by the formality of it all. "Why here?" Peter asked, looking around. "You couldn't have chosen a neutral space." "This is neutral," I said. "It's mine." They didn't sit. I gestured to the folder on the glass table between us. "That's everything. Every unauthorized withdrawal, every signature that doesn't belong to me, every cent that went missing from my personal accounts." Peter didn't reach for it. He just looked at me. "You've been digging." "I've been watching," I said. "It's different." My lawyer stepped in, sliding the folder closer to them. "We have a forensic accountant's report verifying the discrepancies. Several of the transfers involve an LLC under Jordan's name, established during the marriage without my client's knowledge." Jordan's jaw flexed. "You're really doing this?" "You already did," I replied. "You just didn't think I'd find out." Peter remained composed, but there was a tightness in his shoulders, a flicker in his eyes. "You've misunderstood a lot here. The account access was about family continuity. We were trying to preserve assets." My lawyer cut in again. "Assets that were jointly held but unilaterally siphoned. That's not preservation. That's theft." Peter's voice dipped. "Let's not use words we can't walk back." My hands stayed folded on my lap. I didn't flinch. "You used me as a silent partner for your financial cleanup. You made decisions in my name because you didn't believe I'd do anything about it." Jordan's face was flushed now. "Why are you blowing this up? We were trying to keep things afloat." "You kept things controlled," I said. "Not afloat. You just didn't want to lose power." My voice rose, not in volume, but in certainty. Peter reached for his glass of water. The tremble in his hand was small, but I saw it. So did Claire. So did my lawyer. The illusion of control slipped for just a second. "You're overreacting," Peter said quietly. "Let's not embarrass ourselves in front of—" I stood up. "This isn't about embarrassment. It's about ownership, and I've taken mine back." From my pocket, I pulled a second envelope, neatly sealed. Peter recognized the attorney's seal before I even said the words. "Divorce papers," I said. "Irreconcilable differences, emotional negligence, financial betrayal." His mask cracked. "You don't want to do this." I didn't want to sell the estate. I didn't want to live in fear. I didn't want to raise a son who learned how to manipulate before he learned how to apologize. The silence that followed was piercing. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, a neighbor from across the building stood quietly on her balcony, watching through the glass. Another head peeked from a doorway down the hall. "Let them see." Peter's voice finally broke. "You think you'll win in court?" I looked him in the eyes. I already did." He stormed out. Jordan lingered for a moment longer. He looked at me, really looked, like he was seeing someone he didn't recognize. His voice was small. "You really mean it?" "Yes," I said. He left without another word. My lawyer nodded, gathering the papers. Claire walked over slowly, placed a gentle hand on my back. I didn't collapse this time. I didn't tremble. Outside, the city sparkled. Inside, I was finally whole. The door closed behind them with a soft finality. No yelling, no slamming, just the clean, quiet click of departure. Peter's voice no longer echoed off the walls. Jordan's footsteps no longer trailed through the hallways. They were gone. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was clean, still, sacred. I stood in the middle of the living room, half expecting some sound to rush in and replace the space they'd vacated. But nothing came. Just the hush of a new beginning, resting heavy and kind around my shoulders. The sun was rising, gold and gentle through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city below stirred awake, lights fading into the soft brightness of morning. Shadows slid across the pale wood floors, long and slow, as if even the sun knew it needed to tread gently. I moved to the boxes I hadn't yet unpacked. For the first time, I didn't rush through it. I didn't organize for someone else's convenience or arrange things based on appearances. I unpacked for myself, one item at a time. My grandmother's music box, cracked, dusty, but still able to play a tune. I set it on the corner shelf beside the window. A framed photo of my younger self holding baby Jordan, smiling like I still believed in permanence. I paused at that one, then placed it on the side table near my favorite chair. My journal, the one I hadn't written in for years because it never felt safe to write truthfully. I cracked it open, let the blank page stare back at me. "Welcome home," I whispered to no one, or maybe to all the parts of myself I'd left behind over the years. Later that day, Claire came by with a bottle of rosé and a grin that said everything without needing words. She raised the bottle like a sword of triumph. "To freedom?" "To finally learning what that word means," I replied. We toasted in the middle of the kitchen. No glasses, just sips straight from the bottle and laughter that filled the space like fresh air. Marcus joined an hour later, casual as ever. Scout curled up by the couch, tail thumping against the floor with every new wave of laughter. Marcus handed me a small plant in a ceramic pot. "Something that thrives in light," he said. I accepted it with a smile. Perfect. As the sun dipped low again, the three of us sat on the balcony, wine glasses in hand now, quiet in the best way. Claire leaned her head on my shoulder. "You look different." "I feel different." Marcus studied the skyline. "Sometimes healing starts with burning the map." I let those words settle. In the glass, I caught my reflection. Tired but whole, worn but mending. I was no longer the woman who flinched at her own desires, no longer an accessory to someone else's legacy. I was rebuilding, one breath at a time. The past hadn't vanished, but it no longer defined the room. The light in the penthouse was different now. It didn't just drift in. It filled every corner. It touched the walls, danced across the countertops, reflected off the polished glass like it belonged. The silence no longer felt like something I had to endure. It was something I had earned. It hummed like peace. I moved through my morning slowly. No alarm clock, no rush, just the quiet symphony of a life entirely my own. The kettle whistled gently on the stove. The scent of fresh coffee lingered in the air, soft and rich. I wrapped myself in my robe, the fabric light against my skin, and stepped onto the balcony. The city stretched out in all directions below me, still moving, still vast, but no longer intimidating. It felt like possibility. I brought my journal and a pen, the pages already softened by new entries. No more torn sheets, no more redactions, just truth, my own without apology. I wrote slowly, deliberately. Today I woke up unafraid. The world didn't shift beneath me. I am exactly where I belong. My phone buzzed beside me. Claire's name lit up on the screen. "Tell me you're packed," she said, skipping hello. "I'm not packed," I admitted with a grin. "Well, the train leaves in 24 hours and we have 2 shows to see, a winery tour and a coastline to drive. You got 10 minutes to find your suitcase." I laughed, full and real. "Fine, but I'm not bringing heels." "I'd be offended if you did." We chatted about logistics, rental cars, hotel upgrades, a friend of hers in Sonoma who ran a lavender farm. But beneath the surface was something lighter, easier. The kind of friendship that didn't ask you to be small, didn't keep score, didn't tell you to wait your turn. After we hung up, I wandered back inside, coffee mug in hand. The place had finally taken shape. Plants on every windowsill. A painting I'd found in a gallery downtown now hung in the entryway. Abstract and messy and perfect. The guest room had fresh sheets. The kitchen smelled like lemon balm, and a wind chime danced softly above the balcony door. Marcus arrived just before noon. He carried a box of fresh pastries and a book he said I needed to read immediately. He kissed my cheek like it was second nature now, like affection could be offered without demands. "Got 5 minutes?" he asked, setting the box on the counter. "For you, always." We sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the book. Essays on rebuilding, on selfhood, on all the parts of life that get rewritten when you finally stop performing for someone else. Scout curled under the table. Marcus reached for my hand halfway through a page, not to anchor me, but to meet me where I was. "I like you like this," he said. "Like what?" "Unafraid to take up space." I smiled gently. "I'm still figuring it out. That's the point." Later, as he left, he turned back at the door. "Call me before you leave tomorrow. I want to walk you out." I nodded. Always. The rest of the day passed in a rhythm that felt like music. No chaos, just flow. I folded clothes for the trip, made a list of gallery openings I wanted to visit when I got back. I even checked out a few remote writing gigs. Nothing heavy, just enough to tether me lightly to something purposeful. At sunset, I stood on the balcony again. The air smelled like rain on pavement. I watched the city glow to life, each light a testament to motion, resilience, becoming. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was waiting for permission to exist. I wasn't Jordan's mother, or Peter's wife, or Mrs. Whitmore of the estate. I was Madison, just Madison. And that was finally enough. I closed my journal that night with one final line. I broke the chain. And in doing so, I found myself. If this story hit a nerve, it wasn't by accident, it was a mirror. You've seen what silence costs. Now imagine what your voice could reclaim. Stay with us for more stories that don't ask for permission to be told, because some legacies are meant to be broken and rebuilt louder. The next chapter is already turning. You in?